Good evening, everyone. I hope you guys had a great day. I wanted to jump on here. I wanted to jump on here and share the story of Elijah with you. I hope you guys were able to get out and enjoy at least some sunshine. It's still a little cold. I cannot wait to go and buy some more plants and flowers, honey. Some of them didn't come back this year, so I need to get a few more. That's it. But I think this weekend it's going to be nice. I think spring will finally arrive this weekend. I put my snow boots away, so I hope I don't have to pull those back out. But anyhow, Elijah, God spends more time on his preparation for his assignment than he does his ministry. Elijah is a weatherman. God raises up special prophets for special problems. A prophet is somebody who speaks on behalf of God. They are God's mouthpiece, and he still uses people today. He speaks through them to reach out to other people as well. Now, before Elijah arrives, God sends a drought because of what Jezebel. She's a wicked queen. And it's not who she is, it's the spirit of Jezebel. Now, men, you guys can have that spirit too. It's not just the women. But Elijah means the Lord is my God. Elijah's, he was brave. He stood in front of 800 Baal prophets. But he wasn't alone. God was with him. Now, the symbol for Baal was a bull with a lightning bolt on top of it. Baal was a god of the weather. So when God was being challenged in Israel's history by a god of the weather, he sent the weatherman. Now, God tells Elijah to go sit by Break Time River, and I'm going to send through unclean birds, ravens, bread to feed you. God can provide us in ways that we don't even understand. That's how good God is. He's getting Elijah to trust him. So God tells Elijah to rise and go to Zarephath. The god of Zidon is Baal. It's also the land in which Jezebel came from. Now God tells Elijah to stay there. I've provided a widow for you to stay with. He entered into the city, and he sees a widow standing there, but he's not sure if she's the one. Elijah asked her for water. And can you also give me a piece of bread that you have in your hand as well? Can you imagine that? Especially last year, asking somebody for a piece of bread from their hands. How unclean that would be, the virus and everything. But he asked her that because he's looking for who God told him to look for. She says, I have no bread, only a handful of flour and a little bit of oil in a jar. So I'm gathering a few sticks for me and my son so we may eat it and die. That means that's going to be their last meal. So they're going to starve to death. That's what she's saying. So Elijah says to her, don't fear. Do as you've said. Go ahead and make the bread. But make me a little bread cake from it first. You know how selfish she must have sounded? Self-centered? Yeah, go ahead and make your last meal with you and your son, but give me, before you feed your boy, make me a little bread cake out of it first, and you guys can have the leftovers. But then he says, God told me something, and he tells her what God told him. The bowl of flour should not be exhausted, nor should the jar of oil be empty until the day the Lord sends rain to the face of the earth. What he's saying is you're not going to run out. So she went and did what Elijah told her to do because she believed and she trusted that God was speaking through Elijah to her. Being obedient, her and her household ate for many days. The bowl of flour was exhausted, nor the bowl of flour was not exhausted, nor did the jar of oil become empty. Now this widow's son became very sick, and he stops breathing. The little boy dies. And of course the mother's upset. She goes to Elijah. Elijah says, give me your boy. And he carries her boy up to the upper room where he stays, where Elijah's staying. And he lays the boy in his bed. And then Elijah begins to pray. And then he stretched himself onto the child 3 times. And he called to the Lord, let this child's life return to him. And the Lord heard Elijah, and the life of the child returned. Breath returned in his lungs. He awakened. He was alive. God tells Elijah to go see the king, King Ahab. The famine is getting severe, and I'll send the rain. I'll turn the water faucet back on. Now you go see him for me. Now the first person Elijah runs into is Obadiah. That Obadiah means the worker of God. He is a believer, but a timid believer. Somebody who's afraid of the king, but fears God. It's just that he fears the king more when he's in front of the king than he fears God when he's in front of the king. He doesn't have that boldness like Elijah. Now, Jezebel has killed the prophets of the Lord. Elijah's a prophet of the Lord. When she did this, Obadiah hid them by 50s in a cave and provided them with bread and water. And the king didn't know nothing about that. He didn't know he was hiding them and feeding them. Mount Carmel is where Obadiah gets the water from. When Obadiah sees Elijah, he falls to his face. Elijah tells him to get up and go get the king, Ahab. Ahab is a rebel against God. When Ahab saw Elijah, he said, aren't you the causer of the trouble? Aren't you the troublemaker? He doesn't see him being the cause. He sees Elijah being the problem. See, we live in a world, especially end times, we live in a world where those who know God is the problem. Not the sin, it's those that know God. Somehow, Elijah not yielding to his point of view, Ahab's point of view, Elijah is the one who becomes intolerant. He's causing issues. Now, prophets of Baal represent paganism, and they are proud to be a pagan. Elijah says to the people, follow God and turn from your ways. Now, Elijah has learned that God will provide. He's learned to speak hard things to people who don't want to hear them. He's standing in front of over 800 prophets of Baal, just him and God. That's all you need is God. And sometimes you will stand alone with just you and God. Elijah says, let's have a showdown. Tell them to divide an ox, put it on their altar without fire. They think Baal is in control. Fine. Let Baal strike that meat. Fire from heaven is the Hebrew way of saying lightning. Nobody gets to light your sacrifice. You call on your God and I'll call on my God. Let's have a showdown. And the one who answers by fire, he is the God. And all the people say, oh, that's great. What a great idea. Let's do that. So can you imagine Elijah? He had the guts to call out God on the spot like that. But that's because Elijah's preparation with God, that God gave him, prepared him for, that's what gave him the boldness. He's outmanned, remember, and he's outgunned as well. Now they called out to Baal, their God. Nothing happened. And they kept calling out and calling out. Still nothing. As time passes, even Elijah mocks him. Where's your God? So Elijah sets his altar with stones in the name of the Lord, and he made a trench around it. And he arranged the wood and cut the ox in pieces and laid it on the wood. And he puts 4 pitchers of water over it 3 times. The water fills up to the trench, and now Elijah offers a desperate prayer. He drenches the meat, the rocks, everything with water. So if anybody's trying to make an excuse or a reason why that fire was lit, he made sure that they knew that this was my God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he puts 4 pitchers of water over it, and he fills the trench up, and Elijah offers a desperate prayer, and it goes like this: God, if you've ever thought about sending lightning, now would be a good time. Elijah tells God, I've done everything you've told me to do up until this time. God, show them that you are the God. God answers by fire from the sky, consuming the stones, the dust, and the meat. People fell to their faces, saying, He is the God. And Elijah says, Seize the prophets of Baal, and do not let them escape. Kill them all. And they all were killed by sword. Elijah says to his servant, Now go to the top and look towards the sea. See if you see any rain clouds. The servant says there's nothing. And he tells him to go back. And he did. He did that 7 times. And on the 7th time, he says a small cloud, the size of a man's hand, is coming from the sea. And a little while rain poured from the sky. And Elijah, he gets up and he starts running. He beats King Ahab back to the city. And he's in a chariot. And Elijah's on feet. I mean, he was running. God gave him the strength to outbeat him. The day after God showed up, now this is the heart of this story, Elijah falls into depression. The very next day, after God proved that he is the God, and he stood right there with Elijah, but yet Elijah falls into depression. Ahab tells Jezebel all what Elijah had done. Jezebel sends a message to Elijah. You killed all my prophets. You're dead by tomorrow. You're dead. So Elijah runs because he's afraid. And discouragement often comes from fear. So he's sitting under a bush in a hot desert and he says, God, I just want to die. Just take my life. I don't want to live anymore. And God says, be quiet. Basically, go to bed. You need to sleep. And sometimes we need to rest. Rest in the Lord. Physically, mentally, and emotionally, we can be exhausted. And God just wants them to rest, to be still. So he falls asleep. And then an angel wakes him up and feeds him. And he goes back to sleep. Angel wakes him back up, feeds him. He takes another nap. And the angel of the Lord tells him, rest and get some food. He wasn't ready to meet God with God yet. So now he came to a cave, Mount Sinai, where God met Moses. So this is an important spot. The Lord came to him. Elijah cries, I am the only prophet of yours that's left. And God is walking by. God likes to sometimes take a little stroll down here on earth, occasionally. Now, a great strong wind passed by, and God didn't show up in that earthquake. Then fire came from the sky, and God still didn't show up in the fire. A little breeze passed by, and God asked Elijah, what are you doing here? Elijah says, I'm the only one left. God sends him back on assignment, and he tells him, I got over 1,000 that worship and believe in me. Just because you don't see them don't mean I don't have them. You're not the only one. He was dealing with his emotions. Same with David. King David, same thing. Moses. Paul. The men in the Bible still had to deal with their emotions, just like us. They're human. Now, Jezebel coaxed her husband, King Ahab, into Baal worship versus God worship. She even brought 800 Baal prophets into the kingdom to encourage the worship of Baal. Now, King Ahab wanted Naboth's vineyard, And Naboth refused. It had been in his family for many years. But King Jezebel has him killed and takes the vineyard. That's what created the drought that God sent. And Ahab immediately began to fast when he heard Jezebel did this. Because of his fasting, God reversed the destruction during Ahab's generation. But it came from the generation that was coming up after Ahab's generation. They had to pay the price. So Jezebel and all those who fall into idolatry will be thrown in their sick beds. Now, Jehu has Jezebel thrown out a window to her death, and she was devoured by the dogs. Ugh. And King Ahab dies in a battle. He dies before Jezebel dies. Now, Elijah came upon Elisha. Elijah's a rich kid. Elijah starts to follow Elijah. Elijah doesn't really care too much for this kid. He tells him to basically scatter, move on. Quit following me. Like a little brother would follow you around. Go find your own friends. But he continued to follow him. And Elijah served Elijah. He followed him wherever he went up until Elijah's departure. Now they headed to the other side of the Jordan River. Elijah took his cloak, rolled it up, and struck the water with it. The water divided to the left and the right, and the men crossed over on dry ground. Now that happened to Joshua too when they went over to the promised land. And Moses, the Red Sea parted. So in 2 Kings, Elijah knew that soon Elijah would be leaving, and he asked for a double portion of Elijah's spirit. What does it mean? I want to be your successor. I want to pick up where you leave off. Now, God's power that you have in you, I want that too. In 2 Kings 2, chapter 2, verse 10, Elijah says, "If you see me when I am taken from you, it shall be yours." And they continued to talk, and suddenly a chariot of fire appeared with horses of fire and separated the two of them. And Elijah went up like a whirlwind into heaven. Elijah yells, my father, and Elijah drops his well-worn cloak to his faithful follower. Elijah does not die. This makes him an exception to the rule that every man once shall die. Now, I believe Elijah will eventually die. That he'll come back. I believe in the book of Revelation chapter 11, it's very possible that the two witnesses, one of them being Elijah, and I believe the other one's Moses. Not very many people will argue with Elijah not being one of them, but they will when it comes to Moses and Enoch, one of those. But I believe it's going to be Moses and Elijah. Moses, the great lawgiver and the greatest prophet to the Jewish nation, Elijah. When Jesus was on the Mount of Transformation, Moses and Elijah appeared and were speaking about the kingdom. Elijah doesn't die. And God himself buried Moses. And you have Satan and the archangel Michael fighting over the corpse, Moses' body. Now, why would Satan want Moses' body? Well, unless, of course, God wanted to use his body for some future purpose. That's just what I think. So Elijah carries on where Elijah left off with a double portion. Amen. So I believe the end times that Elijah definitely is probably going to be one of the witnesses. And I believe Moses as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get off here. And I'm going to talk about angels. I forgot to look, but I don't have it with me. I can't remember how many times angels are mentioned in the Bible, but we're assigned an angel as a child. And it never says the angel leaves us throughout our adulthood. So I'm going to get into that because Mother's Day is around the corner. And I have a special Mother's Day message I want to share with you. This is the first year that me and my siblings our mom went to be with the Lord. Our first Mother's Day without her. So I hope you guys have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you maybe